KRISTOFFERSON. Good to see you, Fred.
Well, good to be seen.
Well, hey, man. How did it start? How did it begin?
You have to go back to 1996 when I had produced the 10 Easy Pieces album for
Yeah,
Jimmy Webb, which then got Jay Landers and myself interested in trying to see if his label at that point, which was a label called Guardian EMI, would consider doing a singer-songwriter series. And the next one that we came up with was KRISTOFFERSON. And so Jay made the calls to the manager, and manager loved the idea. Apparently, Chris loved the idea and was a big fan of Jimmy's, and said to me, on the phone, well, if you're good enough to produce Jimmy, you're good enough to produce me. And,
yeah,
and so
absolutely.
that started off a good foot. And then we just organized at a time when Chris would be shooting a movie in sort of Western Louisiana and close enough to Austin, Texas, where he could probably take 4 or 5 days and do this album. So we met in Austin in 1997 in late spring, and I brought in musicians from LA and Nashville. So I brought in Larry Paxton and John Willis from Nashville, brought in Mike Baird and Jim Cox from LA, and myself, and then we also used Stephen Bruton.
Yeah,
And Bruton was an old, collaborator and comrade of Chris's, and that was a great decision to bring Stephen in. And Mark Lynette, who's a wonderful engineer of mine in LA, and Beach Boys
yeah,
engineer,
the Beach
Brian
Boys stuff,
Wilson's.
absolutely.
And so Mark came in as the engineer, and we all met in Austin, and we had these 3 days in the studio with Chris, which were just delightful. He just had us in stitches, but at the same time, we were doing the greatest songs he ever did, but finally done the way he wanted to hear them. So almost like a blonde on blonde,
Yeah.
live in the studio, Dylan sort of vibe.
Did he pick the songs? Did you guys pick the songs?
Well, the songs were the obvious ones,
Yeah.
so there was no real picking. It was obvious that, these were the most famous ones.
And when you had some of the guest artists that obviously would love to contribute to the album, how was that process, and how did you maneuver like a Jackson Brown and the Vince Gill and all these guys? And
It was, once we had finished the album, it was really easy for Jay and I to make those calls. Um, we reached out immediately to people we thought would be great. And we also, for the most part, we didn't want duets. We really wanted to do harmony vocals, and we felt that duets might be a little bit clever, and it really didn't suit the album. So everyone who did participate, Alison Krauss, Vince Gill, Steve Earle, Jackson Brown, Mark Knopfler. I mean, everyone really understood that they were really there as a guest appearance. And I think it makes the record even better.
what was your favorite tracks off the album?
I think Sunday Morning Coming Down
Yeah.
is particularly Dylan-esque and
Yeah.
great. It's one of my favorites. And certainly, historically, doing me and Bobby McGee, and doing it very, very plain sort of acoustic guitar and mandolin, and just having Jackson sing the harmony with him. That's a lovely cut.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was listening when I drove from LA to here a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. I was listening to nothing. This before Chris passed away. I was listening to nothing but Jackson Brown albums. I travel listening to. I listen to everything, and I'll put on every Jackson Brown album because it's a long ride, or I'll listen to every Danny O'Keefe album. I like singer-songwriters. It's great with the scenery and stuff. But when I listened to again, prior to Chris passing away, I was listening to Jackson singing with Chris on this album, and I said, my God, these guys sound like brothers. I mean, it was
a good match.
I mean, my God, it was really great. And the production value, I mean, when we work with what we have to work with to make vinyl and CDs, I didn't do anything. This was perfectly produced, just like the Jimmy Webb album you did with us.
Thank you.
I mean, you do a fine job. It's like, I think you already mix it for, I think, every format when you record. I think you must play through different, that's a question. You play through different speakers before you do the final product?
I think we certainly, try to make it work on all formats, and not all formats, but all venues, so to speak.
Yeah. Because that's one thing. It was like perfect tone, semblance. Everything was like just naturally cool. But having the talent of those songs, I mean, the songwriting there, that just added to the flavor,
it was just such a love fest because, the songs were incredible. Chris is, he's gone now, but, my God, he was just the most enjoyable person to be around, on top of the fact that he was just this living legend who, was so completely self-deprecating and so funny. And we just had such a ball. It's actually, these are hardened session characters in the sense that they've seen everything.
Yeah.
But if you ask them the top 10 sessions they've ever done, this will be one of them.
It's interesting because, I remember talking with a promotion man that worked at Columbia when I was working records and stuff back in the day, and they were talking about KRISTOFFERSON when it was a Rhodes Scholar, and when he was in Pomona College out there where we're at in California, right? And I just thought, what a life this guy had. He had a long life. Nobody wants to see anybody go away, but he sure as hell had one checkered, incredible career.
Yeah,
early career.
He was sort of like our country singer-songwriter Errol Flynn.
Yeah.
In the sense that, I know Errol Flynn died a lot younger than Chris. Chris actually really lasted a good long time.
He didn't waste any of that time,
and
it
was a life well lived. Yeah, there's good moments. It's really a magical. It was a magical adventure that turned into a great album.
Well, there's a lot of my friends on there, and obviously you producing it make it. It
was hard. It was hard. I remember doing the background vocals with Vince.
What happened?
Well, just Chris's vocal was so low. He sings in such a low key that we didn't get the good high vocals of Vince because he had to do a third harmony above Chris, which was way too low for Vince's range, And Vince kept on saying, you're not getting your money's worth here, And I said, I am. It's great. And luckily, it did. It worked great. But we were laughing that, some of those vocals, he's really just like this, it's real low, It's almost Johnny Cash, King, keys.
Well, I'm sure he's proud of the work.
It was his favorite album.
Seriously.
He always told me that. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. You've had a blessed career and more years to come in it.
Amen.
Glad to be your pal.